All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for the FAR incentives for non-transient uses. My name is Gabriela Gonzalez. I'm the Neighborhood Affairs Coordinator here with the city. Joining me tonight is Michael Belush from our planning department, and he's going to walk us through a very informative presentation, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end of our meeting. Want to recognize some of the elected officials and members of the mayor's office that are on the call. We have Mayor Miner and Blake Govin. Blake is the commission aide to Mayor Miner. We also have Sarah Murillo from Commissioner Bott's office and Kara Petrella with Commissioner Fernandez's office. So thank you all for joining us on the call. We want to thank all of you that have taken your time to listen to tonight's presentation. So I'll turn it over to Michael to walk us through, and then any questions that we have, please save them until the end, and we will have a Q&A portion for you all. So Michael?
Sure. Thanks, Gabriela, and thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Let me just tee up the presentation here just a second. Can you see it, Gabriela?
Not yet, no.
Just a second.
I can see it now.
And do you see it full screen?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. And thanks again, everybody, for joining us tonight. My name is Michael Belush. I'm Planning and Design Officer for the Planning Department, which is headed by our Planning Director, Thomas Mooney. Tonight, I'm going to discuss proposed changes to the City Code, which will be limited to RM2 and RM3 zoning districts in the Mid-Beach area, which are located north of 47th Street and south of 63rd Street, between the Indian Creek Waterway and the ocean. And I'll have maps that show this area, as well as limited oceanfront parcels south of 5th Street, zoned RPS 4, as well as the RM1 and RM2 zoning districts within the West Avenue overlay area. And again, I will have a map of these areas. In terms of a brief Cliff Notes overview of this proposal, the incentives that I will go into more detail on for each area generally consist of modest FAR or floor area ratio increases of 15 to 25% and potential height increases of 15 to 25 feet in exchange for properties that abandon any existing transient uses and forgo any such uses in the future. First, I'm going to go through a brief outline of the presentation. I'll go over why we are here, the background of the current proposal, state legislation, and our short-term rental map, which indicates where short-term rentals are currently allowed. I will then go into the requirements for a property to take advantage of the incentives, the incentive areas for Mid-Beach and South Beach, and the incentives that are particular to each area. Lastly, I'll go over where we are now in the process and the next steps. So first, why are we here? The city of Miami Beach has experienced a drop in permanent residential population over the last decade. The 2010 US Census indicated that the city had a population of about 87,800 people, while the 2020 census indicated the city had a population of only 82,900, representing a loss of 4,900 residents. Furthermore, the July 2022 Census American Community Survey estimates that the city has a population of just 80,000 people, reflecting a further loss of 2,900 residents in 2 years. This loss may be due to residential homes being used as second or third homes, their use as short-term rental or a conversion to another use, another transit use, the conversion of permanent residences to short-term rentals, or other types of transit uses such as hotel or apartment hotel, and which have had negative impacts on the quality of life of residents for some areas of the city. Transit uses also impact traffic congestion due to a reduced residential supply and an increase in employees commuting longer distances to employment centers within the city. Additionally, guests at short-term rentals and hotels can create nuisances for permanent residences. In order to address these concerns, in October of last year, the City Commission referred an ordinance to the Planning Board to create incentives to replace transit uses with residential uses in certain areas. On January 31st of this year, the City Commission adopted an ordinance establishing a process for any increase in floor area. Since this proposal would increase FAR with incentives, the new process must be followed, including holding 2 community workshops, I'll go over the required timeline at the end of the presentation, and this is the second community workshop in this process. Now, for anyone not familiar with FAR, or floor area ratio, this number is a factor of the lot area and represents the maximum square footage that can be constructed on a site. For example, if a lot is 10,000 square feet and the maximum FAR is 2.0 for the property zoning district, then a maximum of 20,000 square feet could be constructed on the property. Now, due to state legislation passed in June of 2011, the city cannot simply prohibit short-term rentals in areas where they were not prohibited prior to June 2011. The city can, however, create incentives to encourage property owners to voluntarily abandon and prohibit future transient uses, which is the purpose of the proposed FAR and height increases. The next 3 slides show the city's short-term rental map, where the red area indicates where short-term rentals are prohibited. Other colors indicate where short-term rentals are or were permitted on a limited basis. The areas that are gray indicate zoning districts where short-term rental of apartment units is allowed. Now, if you do a Google search for Miami Beach short-term rental map, you can find the same map. And again, the first slide, this is the North Beach area, showing where short-term rentals are prohibited. The gray is where short-term rentals are allowed. The next slide shows the short-term rental for Mid-Beach, where you find predominantly along the ocean in between in the Indian Creek waterway and the ocean, where short-term rentals are allowed in the RM2 and RM3 zoning districts. The next slide shows where short-term rentals are prohibited or allowed on South Beach. And you have the yellow area, which is Flamingo Park, where there's a limited time frame for properties to obtain a short-term rental license within that yellow area. That section of the code has sunsetted, and there's no more short-term rentals are allowed within the Flamingo Park area. The gray areas indicate where short-term rental of apartment units are allowed. Next, I'll go over the incentive requirements. Now, the proposed ordinance creates uniform regulations that applicants must follow in order to utilize the incentives. Eligible developments include residential properties consisting solely of non-transient residential units and allowable accessory uses are eligible to take advantage of the incentives with these specific requirements. First, in order to be eligible for the residential incentives, the property shall be required to fully vacate any and all existing transient uses, including but not limited to bed and breakfast inn, hostel, hotel, apartment hotel, suite hotel, or rooming house. Such transient uses shall be prohibited in perpetuity in order to maintain the residential use incentives authorized for the applicable zoning district or overlay district. Regarding the short-term rental conversion and prohibition, property owners shall first be required to vacate any and all existing approvals for the short-term rental of any apartment units on the property. A restrictive covenant is required, which the property owner must execute and record, affirming that in perpetuity, no residential units on the property shall be leased or rented for a period of less than 6 months and 1 day, and that no transient uses, including but not limited to bed and breakfast inn, hostel, hotel, apartment hotel, suite hotel, or rooming house, shall be permitted on the subject property. Now, for properties located within a historic district, a certificate of appropriateness may be required for the new construction. Lastly, there should be no variances from the requirements of this section. Now, this next slide indicates the areas that I mentioned earlier, which is the RM2 and RM3 zoning districts, north of 47th Street, south of 63rd Street, between the Indian Creek waterway and the ocean, which are subject to these incentives. For the South Beach area, this includes the areas highlighted, which are the RM1 and RM2 zoning districts in the West Avenue Bayfront overlay area, and the RPS 4 district south of 5th Street along the ocean. Next, I'll go over the incentives for each area, as they do vary slightly. In the RM2 district in Mid-Beach, The proposed FAR increase is 15%, which is from 2.0 to 2.3, and an increase in 15 feet in height compared to the current maximums. It should be noted that density is not proposed to be increased anywhere, so the maximum number of units on a site would not be increased, and the added square footage would result in just larger units. In the RM3 district of Mid Beach, the FAR is proposed to increase by 16%. The actual number depends on the lot size, and heights would increase by 10 to 20 feet. It should be noted that there may be future code amendments that would further limit any potential height lower than those indicated here on the slide. In the RPS 4 district of South Beach, the FAR would increase 13% from 2.0 to 2.25, and the height would increase 15 feet from 100 feet to 115 feet. In the RM1 district of the West Avenue Bayfront overlay, the FAR would be increased 28% from 1.25 to 1.6, and the maximum height would be increased 15 feet from 50 feet to 65 feet. Note that these incentives would only apply to properties that have a legally established non-conforming suite hotel or bed and breakfast inn, as such uses are no longer permitted within this RM1 district. In the RM2 district within the West Avenue Bayfront overlay, the FAR would be increased by 25% from 2.0 to 2.25, and the maximum height would be increased of 15 to 25 feet, depending on location and lot size. In terms of the process, the planning board provided preliminary review on March 26th of this year. We held a similar meeting on May 8th to get public comment and feedback, and the planning board reviewed this proposal on May 28th of this year and transmitted that to the City Commission with a positive recommendation. The City Commission looked at this as at their at a first reading public hearing on July 24th. Today is the second community workshop meeting on September 12th. And after this, the City Commission is scheduled to review and potentially adopt these changes at their October 30th, 2024 meeting. Now, after this presentation concludes, we will have a PDF of this, and I have a couple links on this slide to be part of the presentation. And once you have the file, you can click on the link, and that'll take you to the City Commission item where you can get further details on the ordinance today, including the zoning districts where the height increase is proposed, as well as where the FAR increase is proposed. With that, I will end the presentation and open it up for any questions.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm going to turn it over to callers that use the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. Again, that's located at the bottom of your screen. So once those start to come up, I'll unmute you, and then you can go ahead and state your question, and we'll do our best to address. I did want to recognize Commissioner Laura Dominguez, who joined in a little after I had concluded my introduction. So welcome, Commissioner, and thank you for being here with us. I'm going to turn it over to my first caller, which is Keith. If you could state your full name for us, and please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I am Keith Marks. I'm actually the president of RPS4 Continuum on South Beach. I'm president of SOFNA. And this is and I'm glad Laura's on there because Laura was consistent and a sponsor, and I'm not going to mention names, but I was very concerned listening to the last commission meeting. And there were commissioners who actually started questioning this process. Should we convert hotels which are transient, in which the owner is willing and ready to move it over to permanent condos? This particular one is, and I'll mention it, is the Marriott. They even went through a referendum. They now, with this passage, would have had the FAR that they had to get a referendum to get. They also, though, with the increased FAR, they had a very large, they're on the beach, and they had a very large historic building that they needed to save, and garage space. And in doing that redesign, this year, they realized that instead of 115 feet, which you're moving it to, they need 145, 35-foot variance. You know, if that's going to be the difference between converting it or leaving it a Marriott hotel that we do not need and the neighborhood doesn't want as transient, you know, it's mind-boggling. They did defer it, they didn't kill it, but we need some consistency on this from the commission and direction to say that is this something we want to do? Yeah, well, if they came back and asked for 250 feet, SOFNA wouldn't have backed it, but we back in March talked to the community. We talked to Glass, who is the taller building and will be still taller than the Marriott. So my concern is that you put these rules in, there's got to be a little flexibility. They didn't ask for extra FAR. They need 35 extra feet to be able to fully utilize the FAR that you're granting them. So that's my point. That's my issue. I hope that there's some consistency and some little tolerances that can be given within the organization, the commission. I don't know if Laura wants to comment on it, but that's the concern. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Let me provide some more information here. What you mentioned for the Marriott, actually there was an FAR increase. That was a voter referendum that was passed. So that was a separate process that happened for that site where the FAR was increased. And while this process we have now that I went over with tonight, this started before the Marriott filed their own private application to increase the height. Since they already received a FAR increase, they're not required to go through this 6-step process since that is not part of their proposal. But that is a separate that is going through a separate process compared to the legislation I discussed tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll actually cue it up now over to our Commissioner Dominguez. You can please unmute yourself there.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Keith, you and I can talk offline about the Marriott Stanton item. I was as surprised as you were with the outcome, but I'm glad that the project is still alive and it's just one extra step we have to go through, but you and I can talk separately about that. I raised my hand because I had a question. Michael, thank you for doing this great presentation. And everything was clear with the exception of, I think it was the last slide that you had on West Avenue. Is it possible to bring it back up?
Sure,
Was it
yes.
the last slide or the second to last slide? Let's see. Okay, that one. No, the other one. So the first number one, 2.0 to 2.5, it wouldn't be 2.25?
No, the proposal is to go from 2.0 to 2.5 for the RM2 district.
Okay, I just wanted to get clarification on that because I thought it was a little bit less than 25%. But that was it. That was my question. Thank you for clarifying and for all of the hard work that you and the planning department have done on this, because I know that I've had multiple meetings with Tom and other folks, and I'm so happy to see this getting through the second public hearing. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to turn it now over to Cindy, Pitroff. You can please unmute yourself there.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just had a question. I wanted to know if there were any studies done on why residents are leaving.
I'm not aware of any studies that have been done. I know that some things have been raised regarding the cost of housing, especially the rental market, but I don't think the city has done any studies in particular regarding that.
So without understanding why the residents are leaving, we're coming up with a with developer incentives instead of understanding why we're losing residents?
I mean, I can bring your comments to the attention of the city commission. That's what the purpose of this meeting is to present the proposal and provide any comments and feedback to members of the city commission.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm going to turn it over to our next caller. You can please unmute yourself. It's Yohan Moore.
Yes, good evening, and thank you, both of you and everyone for your interest in this issue. This is not my neighborhood. None of these concern my neighborhood, but I have to see this in a comparable light to seemingly parallel proposals for Washington Avenue. And I wanted to address a comment that the last speaker had made, but I'm afraid I just got distracted. I'm sorry, and have forgotten my point, so I will leave it at that. My apologies. I've had something going on here. Maybe I'll come back to it later. Thank you very much.
No,
And,
no
uh,
worries.
and I'll
Go-
just give a quick comparison because we had the workshop on the Washington Avenue incentives a couple of nights ago. So this is a much more scaled down comparison to that. The Washington Avenue incentives would result in approximately, it could result in approximately 100% increase in FAR compared to what's allowed now. And this proposal generally is from 15 to 28% increase. And the area is limited, to the residential districts versus the Washington Avenue incentives, which are pertaining to commercial districts.
Thank you, Michael. And I'm not seeing any other speakers with their hand raised, so perhaps we can put up your contact information so that way everyone
Sure.
on the call knows how to reach you while we get a few other hands that come in. I'm seeing now Manny's iPhone. If you can please unmute yourself and state your question.
Hello, hi, yes, my name is Manny Mirage. I live at 1321 Flamingo Way. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so with regards to the elevation of the roads in certain areas in the West Avenue overlay area, I know my street is one of them that's gonna be raised. Is there any consideration for where the streets are being raised to give a little more leeway legroom for fall?
That's not part of this proposal. That may be something that the city establishes in the future, especially if you have buildings that end up having their first floor located below street level.
Okay. All right,
So
thank
that
you.
is that there have been discussions or talk about what ways to incentivize, or if you have a building that as a result of street raising results in the building appearing shorter now because the streets are higher, allowing that square footage to be placed on the roof versus on the ground floor where it is now. So there has been some discussion regarding some sort of incentives or allocation for properties impacted by street raising.
Well, I hope before anything could be finalized, this could be taken into consideration, especially to the single-family homes in the area in the West Avenue overlay.
Like I said, and this would not apply to the single family. It would apply to single family homes within the RM1 and RM2 districts, but it wouldn't apply to any properties that are outside of those districts.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'm going to turn it over to our next caller. The name on the screen is iPad. If you can please state your name and unmute yourself there.
Hi, Cecilia Torres here. Curious, is there any legislation? I know the Washington Avenue legislation goes up to 17th Street, and this one we're picking up on 46th Street. Is there anything that is capturing those oceanfront lots or the area between 17 and 46 in the process?
There's nothing in the process for those properties at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Again, I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so maybe Michael, if you want to just walk us through really quickly how people can best reach you, should they have any other questions or specific questions that might need to get addressed offline.
Sure, you can email me directly at michaelbaluch@miamibeachfl.gov or the communications department, and we can send you this presentation. And I can also email you directly links that are up on the screen here. I know you can't click on them from the presentation tonight, but if you get a PDF copy of this, these links are clickable and will take you to the City Commission item. When the City Commission last reviewed this in July, and you'll see the specific details for every area, including the exact heights and staff analysis and the actual code changes themselves. And then again, you can feel free to ask me any questions. There's also going to be a adoption public hearing on October 30th. So if anybody wants to attend the October 30th commission meeting, they're welcome to do so to provide any sort of additional comments or feedback.
Thank you. And I think Mr. Moore might have remembered his question, so I'm going to turn it over to him again.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, it came back to me. Anecdotal evidence, scuttlebutt, if you will, from within Flamingo Park especially, points to second homeowners and in particular illegal short-term rentals as being a big source of displacement of residents. And the simple math, I think, begins to address that. Working class families frequently will be 3, 4, 5, 6 in a 2-bedroom apartment, whereas when those are converted to short-term rentals, very rarely do that many people pile in. And when they do, we're really in trouble because they tend to be party apartments. I really do want to second what the lady who spoke a couple of speakers before me said, that any kind of data, either hard or increased anecdotal evidence that is in fact the source of the problem, I think can only give us greater clarity. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your
Thank
comment.
you, Johan.
All right, I'm not seeing anyone else with hands raised, so I think that concludes the presentation. Thank you again, Michael, and thank you to all who joined us this evening. We hope that you have a great rest of your evening, and again, please keep in contact with us, and we'll be sure to send all of this information to you so that it's readily available. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.